Okay, the name of the shir today for Parshas Miketz and Chanuka is called Chanuka and Consumerism. Should everyone take advantage of Black Friday and Cyber Monday, and I guess now in Canada you also have Boxing Day, which is becoming less and less relevant according to the media, right? Because you have all of these pre-shopping days, right? So it's such an exciting time of year where we get to deplete our bank accounts, isn't it? And our credit lines. Yeah. So let's take a look and what this whole concept of consumerism has to do with our Parsha and what it has to do with Chanuka. Parshas Miketz. The pasuk that we're going to be building off of in Parshas Miketz is the following. It's in Perek Mem Beis, pasuk Aleph and Beis. Vayar Yaakov ki yeshever b'Mitzrayim. It's the time of famine, and the brothers have already. The brothers now are together with their father Yosef. Has already been sold as a slave, and he's now the viceroy of Egypt. And Yaakov says, "I see that there's provision available in Egypt." Vayomer Yaakov levanav lama tisra'u. Yaakov says to his sons, "Why should you be visible?" Now that language is a little bit strange. Why should you be visible? We'll have to define what that word means. Vayomer, and then Yaakov further says, "Hinei shamati ki yeshever b'Mitzrayim." Behold, I've heard there is provision in Egypt. Ridu shama, go down there. V'shivru lanu misham, and gain some kind of provision for us. V'nichya v'lo namus, so that we may live and we will not die. And that's how Yaakov tells his sons, it's time for you now to go down to Egypt and get some food for us and bring it back to Canaan. Now the Sforno explains, I'll peep Shuto Shel Mikra, the simple explanation. He explains that the reason why Yaakov says to his sons, Lama Tisra'u, why are you being visible, is, the Sforno says, Lama, in source number 2, Lama Tabitu Ze El Ze. Why are you looking at each other? And each one of you is like waiting for the other one to make the first step and to go down and do something about the famine. There's a famous phrase in the Talmud that says that if you have a pot that is owned by two people, it'll never get hot and it'll never get cold. Meaning that when you sort of like you end up in deadlock when two people are partners in an endeavor. It's why it's always terrible to have co-chairmen of a committee. Because when you have co-chairman of a committee, then each one is relying on the other one to get the work done, right? Unless they really are dedicated workers, of course, and they work well together and they know how to divide responsibility. But the Gemara says that if two people are partners in a utensil, in a pot, then each one's going to be relying on the other one to do something with it, and it'll just collect dust. And so therefore, okay, and so that's what the Sforno says. What Yaakov was telling is, what are you just doing looking at each other? Don't just look at each other. Do something. Take care of the problem, guys. Boy, it sounds like a parent that I know. Anyway, comes along Rashi. Yep, maybe I'm being overly cynical, but did you ever walk into your house and the doorbell's ringing, the phone is ringing, and the washing machine is going off, and your kids are just sitting there doing nothing? Has it ever happened to you, or is it just in my home? No? Right? Right. So now you have a pasuk that you call Lama Tisro. What are you just sitting there looking at each other? Pick up the phone, answer the door, turn off the buzzer, and anyway. So Rashi says. Lama Tisro. This is the deeper meaning based on the Gemara. This is a Gemara. Now Rashi is quoting. Lama tar'u atzmechem bifnei b'nei Yishmael uvnei Esav ki'ilu atem seveim. Why are you overtly demonstrating or behaving in a way that is visible to others? And it's specifically to the b'nei Yishmael and the b'nei Esav, the descendants of Yishmael and Esav, who are apparently around us at this time. And you look like everything's great. You look like you're completely satisfied, seveim, you're completely sated, and there's no famine. He says, because Shaba'ota Sha'a Adayin Hayalahem Tavua. Because at that moment, even though the land of Canaan, the entire Middle East, was in the midst of famine, Yaakov still had food and grain in the silo, in his personal silo. And he said, there's something wrong here. We have food. Our neighbors don't have any food. It's not okay for us to act like there's nothing wrong. Because if everyone else around us is experiencing famine, we can't just go on as if there's nothing wrong. We have to also participate and act like as if like we're also affected. There's a certain, almost like a maris ayin, if you will. There's almost like this idea that you can't just because everything's fine, everything in the world is great for you, because you've stocked up and you've saved up, doesn't mean that you have a right to act that way. If everyone else is going down to Egypt to get provision, then that's what you have to do as well. Even though we don't need it yet, but I want you to go down anyway, so that when you're traveling on the caravan and people will see, hey, Jacob's son, you'll say, yeah, we got to get some grain as well. The Ramban asks a very interesting question on Rashi. The Ramban asks the question. He says, I don't understand. He says, source number 4. He says, Umash omer al taru atzmechem seveim b'fnei b'nei Yishmael b'nei Esav lo havinosi. He says, I don't understand this Rashi. She'ein b'nei Yishmael b'nei Esav ata be'eretz Canaan. He says, those were not the neighbors of Yaakov and his sons. The descendants of Esav and Yishmael were not living in Canaan. They weren't his neighbors. What the Gemara should have said that Rashi is quoting is that don't make yourself conspicuous to your neighbors in the land of Canaan. Why specifically the descendants of Esav and the descendants of Yishmael? So the Ramban has a slightly different way of explaining it. He says, "V'ulai hayu b'nei Yishmael u'b'nei Esav ba'im me'eretz achuzasam el Yosef lishbor." He says, what's possible to explain in Rashi is that, look, b'nei Yishmael and b'nei Esav were in the Middle Eastern region anyway. They weren't in the land of Canaan, but they also had to go to Egypt in order to get provision because the famine was all over. And v'hayu ba'im derech eretz Canaan ovrim alav, and they would have to pass through Canaan on their way to Egypt. In order, because if they were on the other side of the Jordan, let's say, or if they were coming from the north, they'd have to pass through the land of Israel and the Sinai Peninsula in order to get into Egypt, right? So therefore, v'amar lahem shelo yaru atzman sveim bifneihem ki yachshadu sheyesh le'Yaakov tevua. And therefore, while they're passing through, you don't want to look like everything's hunky-dory because they're going to feel that, you guys have grain. And then they're going to want to eat you out of house and home. What happens, right? If my mother tells this story. My mother, when right after the war, well, not right after the war, but she came to, it was right after the war, right? Or shortly after the war. And she came to the United States. It was much after the war. She came to the United States. And she had heard that someone had her maiden name. And she heard that someone's name was Stolzberg, which is my mother's maiden name. So she goes he owns a store. So she goes over to him and says, my name is Stolzberg also. The person said immediately, we're not related. Right? And this was a common story. Why was this a common story? Because whenever people were worried, they came to the United States, and all of this whole mass flow of refugees from the war came, and people were worried. These people are going to want to move in with me. They're going to want to eat me out of house and home. So Yaakov's fear was that when Bnei Esav and Bnei Yishmael pass through our territory, and they're going to see that we have food because we're not worried about the famine, they're going to want to move in with us. So therefore, do me a favor and pretend at least, or give off the impression that we also are being affected by the famine, so that when they come by, we could say, we're in the same boat as you are. Let's go to Egypt together. That could have been the attitude, says the Ramban. But now take a look at the Maharsha. The Maharsha is a classic commentary on the Gemara. So this Maharsha appears in Maseches Tainis, page 10, where this Gemara originates. And he says something very, very telling, very profound, and I have it underlined. He says, he quotes the Ramban, he quotes the Ramban's question, and he says as follows, he says, Aval nir'eh, ki hakin'a shenemra hacha, lo shayecha rak be'achim kirovim. He says, what was Yaakov worried about? He was worried about jealousy. He was worried about resentment. This kind of jealousy and resentment does not come from Canaanites. It comes from kin. It comes from relatives. And he says, Umitam shiyeh ha'adam imechav bitsara. And the reason is because a person should always feel a sense of travail if he knows that his kin, his own mishpacha, his own brethren are in Sarah. He has to feel that Sarah as well. Kidamuchach kol hasugya. V'davar ze ein lachush rak bitzaras achimu krovim. Ulahachi nakat b'nei Yisrael v'yishmael sheyimizar Avraham. Nechshavim az ke'achimu krovim livnei Yaakov. Aval sharu mos lo shayich be'kin azu lios bitzara imayim. He says that's the difference between the Bnei Yishmael and Bnei Yisrael. We're mishpacha. We're mishpacha, and therefore it's so much more painful when you know that a member of your own mishpacha is doing well when you're not doing well. And that's what causes the jealousy. You're not jealous of Warren Buffett. You're jealous of your sister-in-law who lives in a beautiful home, who doesn't even have a fraction of the money that Warren Buffett has. Right? Do you understand that? Am I speaking to you? Right? Do we appreciate the idea? That's the reason why it says Davka b'nei Yaakov u'b'nei Yishmael. And I'm going to give you one other explanation, and this is how we're going to relate it to Chanuka. The Gemara in Maseches Shabbos says, when it talks about the laws of Chanuka, it says, Amar Rabba, Ner Chanuka mitzvah lahanicha b'tefach hasmucha lepesach. That there's a mitzvah of Chanuka, and that mitzvah, the Gemara says, optimally should be by placing the menorah in your doorway. Now people do this in Eretz Yisrael, even to this day. But because we've been living in the diaspora for so many centuries, we've gotten into the habit of not opening our doors, because this was traditionally a dangerous thing to do when you lived in the diaspora. So we instead put it in our window. But classically, the Gemara describes a practice that was really supposed to, the right way was open your door and put it in your doorway. So then the Gemara asks the question, where in the doorway are you supposed to place the menorah? Because after all, it could go on one side of the door, it could go on the other side of the door. So Rav Acha Barei de Rava Amar Miyamin. So one opinion of the Gemara is Rav Acha, and he says you should put it on the right side of the door because that's where your mezuzah is, of course. And Rav Shmuel Midifti Amar Mismol. And Rav Shmuel Midifti says you should put it on the left side. And the Gemara concludes the Hilchata Misimol. And that's actually the halacha. Put it on the left side of the door. Kidei shetei ner Chanuka misimol u'mezuzah miyamin. So that when you walk in the door, you'll be surrounded by mitzvahs. You'll have your mezuzah on the right side. You'll have your menorah on the left side, and everything will be great. In other words, you'll be surrounded by mitzvahs. We sent out a little small 3-minute message before Shabbos, which you can find on KosherTube, where I offer another insight into this halacha of the mezuzah miyamin and the menorah misimol. But I want to offer a different suggestion today. There's another interesting Gemara that says, based upon the way that the menorah in the temple was situated. Now, I want you to think for just a second that imagine in your mind's eye that you're walking into the temple in Jerusalem. And there's a part of the temple, most of the temple floor plan is open space. It's a courtyard. There's no roof. But there's one area in the temple known as the Heichal, which is the covered area, which is a room which is divided by a big divider called the Paroches. and it divides between the holy and the holy of holies. And let's say you're walking into the holy area, and there are a number of items in that holy area. There's the menorah, the 7-pronged menorah that was lit every day by the Kohen. There's the shulchan, which is the showbread table, where they would have these 12 loaves of bread that would miraculously stay fresh the entire week. And there was the incense altar. So I want you to imagine for yourself, you're walking through the door of the Heichal, and you're looking straight ahead. On your left side, you're going to see the menorah. On your right side, you're going to see the showbread table. And it's on that basis that the Gemara suggests the following halacha. The Gemara in Bava Basra says, Amar Rabbi Yitzchak harotze sheyachkim yadrim, that if you wish to become wise, then during your Shmon Esrei, during your silent prayers, you should face south. Now, why should you face south? Because the menorah was on the south side. Now, what does that mean? It means because when you're walking into the Heichal, what direction are you facing? Anyone know?
West.
You're facing west, exactly. Who said that? Who said west? You're facing west. And so therefore, on your left side is what? Is south, is the menorah. Okay? So harotze sheyachkim yadrim, if you want to become wise, face south, which is facing the menorah in your mind's eye. And v'sheya'ashir yatzpin. But if you wish to become wealthy, you should face north, because north is the side of the showbread table. So these two instruments of the temple represent two different ideals within Judaism. One is intellectual enrichment, and one is physical enrichment. The showbread table represents physical enrichment because it's the table with all the fresh bread on it. And let's not minimize the importance of that. That's quite important. But there's also the menorah, which represents the light of Torah, which represents intellectual enrichment, which is even more important. And so therefore the Gemara is saying that there may be times in your life where you really need a parnasa, so you'll be facing north, but there'll be other times when you feel, all right, Baruch Hashem, I have a parnasa, let me focus on my Torah knowledge, my intellectual enrichment, and I'll face south. Now, as a matter of course, you should know the halacha, we always face east, we face Yerushalayim, but the Gemara is offering an alternative of facing one of these two directions, which we don't really paskin like from a halachic standpoint. So don't misinterpret this as a halachic directive, but rather just as a principle, an ideal. Okay? So what I'm suggesting to you is as follows. Sometimes you have to choose between the right side and the left side, between north and south. Sometimes you have to make a choice whether you're going to be emphasizing spiritual enrichment or intellectual enrichment versus physical enrichment. And this is a perfect example. The Gemara is saying you can't face north and south simultaneously. You have to choose between one or the other. Chanuka is a holiday that commemorates our opposition to a form of hedonism, a form of indulgent lifestyle, which was one of the things that was threatening, which was a threat from the Greeks of the time. It was this idea of consumerism, of just complete indulgence within the physical world, and that this is what we're supposed to be doing and indulging in this kind of life. Indulge in this world, because really, like we talked about the philosopher, really God doesn't care, right? And therefore what we are told to do is place the menorah on the left side, so that when you walk through your door, you'll be imagining the menorah of the temple on the left side, or in the south, in the case of when you walk into the temple. And that's why I believe that the Gemara is extolling the virtue of placing the menorah on the left side. And with this, perhaps we can understand a new insight into the Rashi that we started with. When Rashi says that I don't want you to give off the appearance to Bnei Esav and Bnei Yishmael, come on, what is this a code word for? Who are Bnei Esav today? Christianity. Who is Bnei Yishmael today? Islam. Many times Chazal speak in this kind of coded communication. What really what Chazal are telling us is a directive to the far-flung future. When you as the Jewish people are going to be situated in the Golus, in the diaspora, and you're going to be able to be a light unto the nations and be influential to the rest of the world, don't give off the impression that you're living in the lap of luxury and your life is all about indulgence. Because you have an obligation to be an example, to set an example for the rest of the world. You have an obligation to be a teacher to Bnei Esav and to Bnei Yishmael. They need to learn from you what value systems that they should hold dear in their lives. And if they're not going to learn from you, they're not going to know. So, while we have a wonderful time over the Chag, and while we shower our families with gifts and with joy, and with sufganiyot and with dreidels and chocolate coins, let's also remember that indulgence and consumerism as a value is not something that we should be emphasizing on Chanukah. If anything, we should teach the world that we have to direct our focus towards intellectual enrichment, to enrichment of the menorah, and not to the enrichment of the showbread table. That's specifically the directive of Lama Tisra'u that Yaakov is trying to communicate to his sons. Have a good week, everybody.